gender sexuality studies with an emphasis on Black enslaved women, their reproduction, as well as their reproductive resistance, how they fought back during enslavement. And today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about the Black maternal and infant mortality rate here in the United States. I'm not sure how much information you know. Some may be repeat if you know about it. Some of it may be new. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm just gonna let you know now, my dog injured his leg, so he's under me, and every now and again he'll cry out. So just letting you know that I'm not over here beating children. My dog.
Oh no, Dusty! I'm gonna have to come check on Dusty.
I know, girl. He's so pitiful. He's so pitiful. So I don't know what he did with his knee. We probably have to take him to the vet. But he's hopping around on 3 legs right now. So I'm going to share my screen. And let me know if you all can see that.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And while I'm presenting, I'm going to turn my camera off just so I'm not a distraction. So I'm going to stop my video and start the presentation. All right. And you all can see this clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so the title of my presentation is No One Saves Us But Ourselves, Black Birth Workers to the Rescue. And I got that quote from Buddha, and here it is on the screen. It says, no one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. And I asked you to do the short exercise about what do you think when you hear the word birth or what your birthing experience is because everyone has not had the same birthing experience, especially when we talk about Black women. One person in particular I wanted to bring up was Serena Williams. She actually has an HBO special where she talks about her birthing experience and how she, even Serena Williams, still had to fight and advocate for herself during the birthing process and thereafter. So I think it's important to honor that and understand that, you know, some of us may have had great birthing experiences, but overall for Black women, that is not the case. And that is a picture of me with my grandson. I actually was at his birth in 2018. And I definitely had to advocate for my daughter several times during her delivery. All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit of history. I'm a history buff. I love history, but I'm going to say her story. And that starts with the story of midwives, granny midwives. And they were traditionally used not only for Black birth, but also during slavery. These women attended to the births of their enslavers' wives, daughters, sisters. Sometimes they were rented out to other plantations, whereas their enslaver was paid for their services. So this is a picture of a granny midwife. However, in 2020, we're talking about last year, it was still estimated that 41 out of 100,000 Black mothers died during childbirth in the United States. During my research of Black birth workers, I discovered my mother and her grandmother were both delivered at home by my great-grandmother and her sisters. This revelation makes my research all that more personal because I asked my mother, how was my birth experience? And I was actually born at Quantico Marine Base in a military hospital. And my mother was actually discharged because she was pregnant with me. My father was still in the Marines. My mother was a Marine. But during my birth, my father was not allowed to attend, and my mother was not allowed to hold me. She was actually whisked away. I was actually whisked away to the nursery. She was not allowed to hold me, nurse me, or anything. And so, you know, I just think it's really key to see how far we've come, whereas with granny midwives, they attended, as the slide says, up to 75% of the births still in the United States in the 1940s. But they were outed by the medical establishment, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. And I like this quote from Sharifa. She's actually a public health advisor, and she teaches Black doulas and midwives. And she said, one of the darkest moments in the US history was the systematic eradication of the African-American midwife from her community, resulting in the legacy of birth injustice. Black midwives were also well respected in their community, but beginning in the early 1800s, many states created laws that began to prohibit them. Lamaze International reminds us that Black midwives for centuries have played a critical role in improving the care and outcomes for Black families. Since the removal of Black midwives, Black women and infants have experienced the worst birth outcomes of any racial ethnic cohort in the United States. So I'm gonna ask if someone can read from the chat. If you can drop in the chat how many Black midwives you think there currently are in the United States. And if someone can read me the numbers, because unfortunately I can't see the chat while I have my presentation up. So if you could just drop in the chat how many Black midwives you think there currently are in the United States. Anybody want to read the numbers for me?
I put 1,000. I don't know.
Okay.
Nicole put 450. Tony put 13,000.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Currently, there are only 15,000 Black midwives in the United States. That's less than 2% of all midwives. And considering the amount of women that give birth in this country, that is a dismal number. There's no way 15,000 Black midwives can attend the amount of births that we have currently in the United States. So the reason for this presentation, I want to talk about the problems and then also solutions on how we can improve the use of Black midwives and doulas, as well as decrease Black maternal and infant death. So problem number one is Black maternal outcomes. According to the CDC, Black mothers in the United States die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers and are 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth related causes. So that can be preeclampsia, that can be pulmonary edema, high blood pressure, stroke, and these are things that happen within that first year of giving birth. So they count the numbers from the time that mother gives birth until that infant is a year old. So these are things that can happen a week after delivery. Actually, when I was a Girl Scout troop leader, there was a mom who died a month after giving birth to a new baby. And I was shocked. I just did not, this was a civilian. When I was in the military, we had moms die all the time, but they had like a lot of health issues. But this mom seemed healthy to me at the time, but now understanding why Black mothers are dying is just really, we have to change that. So that leads to my question, why? Anyone want to drop in the chat, why do you think Black mothers are dying 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers? You can drop that in the chat, and Rhonda, if you could read that for me, that'd be great, what people are saying.
Not receiving proper health care. Quality health care. Lack of empathy by healthcare workers, cost too much. Those are good information.
Good. The number one cause is racism. Racism is an evergreen toxin in American society and has long served as a primary ingredient for racial inequality. Centuries of subjugation by individuals and systems have created a toxic environment for African Americans, especially Black women. Dr. Arlene Geronimus in 1990s coined a phrase called weathering hypothesis. And she examines the idea that anticipating and managing racism increases stress levels for Black people. But this starts when we're young girls, as young as 5, as part of the adultification. So we just saw that with baby Micaiah Bryant, how she was murdered last week by the police officer because she was a bigger girl. She was a little heavy set, and immediately she's seen as a threat. And that is called weathering. So thank you. So here's a chart in the United States of the maternal mortality ratio. As you can see, Black women are essentially off the charts compared to white women, Hispanic women, Asian, Pacific Islander. But then we're close to our American Indian and Alaskan Native sisters. Why do you think we are close to our American Indian and Alaskan Native sisters? And anyone can speak that out.
Because they're Black, even though they don't claim it.
Okay, that's a great guess. Anybody else? Well, we can go look at history. Today we have Rick Santorum just totally erased Native Americans and Indigenous people in his rant today. And the same thing has happened to Black people. So when we go into medical facilities for care, we're already seen as other than, less than, not worthy of the care that white women receive. I mean, basically, I mean, even our children, when we take our children into the ER and things of that nature, our children are treated differently than white children are. So yes, they're seen as Black. And I also wanted to show, this is Maryland. This is from 2013 to 2017. And even in the state of Maryland, a state where we feel like, you know, we're doing better than like a Louisiana or a Kentucky, we still have a high Black maternal mortality rate. And I just wanted you all to look at that chart. And then when you look at the United States, which is at the end, as compared to United States, we're 4 times, in the state of Maryland, we're 4 times that of white women in Maryland. So the question is, when did this start? And I have this picture here of our foremothers that were enslaved. And I want to share, you know, we all know about Henrietta Lacks and the theft of her cancer cells and how many universities have profited off of her cells as well as her death. But when we go back to slavery, there was a doctor by the name of James Marion Sims, who is known as the founding father of gynecology. But he did this by operating on enslaved women without their consent and without any anesthesia. To gather his knowledge, he'd operate upwards to 20 times on a single woman. And normally they would be on all fours on a table. So just think about, when you look at these women, I get emotional every time I think about it, that these women were subjected to this. And they could not say no because they were enslaved individuals. Sims concluded enslaved women do not have the same pain threshold as white women. And through his text and other findings, he created terrible and horrendous experiments on Black women, exposing not only their breasts, but their genitalia to their enslavers and other individuals who wanted to get into the field of gynecology, which was in its infancy. During a 4-year period in the mid to late 1840s, Sims carried out operations on 12 to 17 enslaved women, each one 20 to 30 times. There was one woman by the name of Arnica, who was with him from the very beginning. She was actually one of his enslaved people, and she was the recipient of 30 surgeries. And she numerous times asked for pain medication to kill herself, but it was withheld from her. Dr. Deidre Cooper Owens, in her book, Medical Bondage, wants us to remember these women, that they were not only just experimented on, then they had to go back to their plantations and continue their work. And so just imagine that here we have leave, we have sick leave and things of that nature. These women were basically butchered in their reproductive area and then had to go back to their plantations. Again, their enslavers were paid for them to be used. Problem number 2. Can somebody read that slide for me?
Black infants in America are now more than twice as likely to die as white infants, a racial disparity that is actually wider than in 1850, 15 years before the end of slavery, when most Black women were considered chattel.
So today, we're talking about 2021, Black infants are dying twice the rate of white infants than they did during enslavement. I want us to just sit with that for a minute. With all the technology that we have, all the knowledge, information that we have, why are our babies still dying? So here's a chart where education is not helping us. Dr. Keisha Bentley Edwards, co-author of Fighting at Birth, Eradicating the Black-White Infant Mortality Gap, states that particularly for Black women, despite age, educational attainment, and socioeconomic status, our exposure to racial inequities and injustices throughout our life directly impact our babies' birth outcomes. So not something that we've done, none of that is strictly racism that is causing our babies as well as us to die. She goes on to say that understanding the research requires a rejection of the tendency to point to traditional risk factors such as obesity, drug use, or alcohol consumption. Instead, it is crucial to recognize that greater vulnerability of Black infants cannot be explained by blaming Black women and families. There were 2 researchers, Lisa Rosenthal and Marcy Lobel, who looked at the historical and social effects of gendered racism. They found that social conditions, including exposure to offensive stereotypes about Black mothers, such as us being irresponsible or as being super sexual, coupled with the sordid history of abuse by the medical field in the Black community, also contribute to the toxic stress levels that cause Black women to die during or after childbirth and our children. So as you can see on this chart, Black mothers with a doctorate or professional degree are still dying double the rate of white women with the same degree. All right. So the next problem is lack of access to doula care. Doula comes from the ancient Greek word meaning a woman who serves. Most Black women do not know that they can work with a doula during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Doulas are trained to provide emotional, physical, and informational support to women throughout their pregnancy, as well as in the postpartum period. This significantly reduces complications and or death. So again, I want to reiterate, despite the long history of Black midwifery, there are only less than 2% of Black midwives in the United States. And doulas are, I'm sure everyone's heard of Erykah Badu being a doula. There are several women, you can be a lay doula, so that's where you are attending the birth of a friend, a sister, or what have you. But doulas also help with lactation support. Doulas are also there to understand your environment, because our environment, stress levels, things of that nature also affect us. They can also go to your doctor's appointments. So if you want to become pregnant, you can take your doula with you to your doctor's appointment. She can actually advocate for you. Problem number 4, cost barrier. How much do you think the average cost for a doula is in the Washington, D.C. area? And you could just call that out.
You mean per year or?
Per birth.
Oh, per birth, about 10 grand.
Okay, if you wanted to hire a doula, okay, 10 grand. Anybody else?
I was thinking the same thing, Tony, about 10K.
Okay, anybody else?
I was thinking about 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, the actual cost of doulas in the Washington, D.C. metro area range in the price of $1,000 to $3,000.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yes, 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 yes. But the issue is we don't know this. So if we don't know this, we don't have access to this. And what I'm finding in my research is that white women are using doulas and midwives, birthing centers, birthing at home because it's chic, it's something they can brag about. But for us, we need these individuals during our pregnancy, birthing, and postpartum to save our lives. Also, most insurances will reimburse for doula care. Right now, Maryland Senator Arthur Ellis from Charles County, he just sponsored a bill, can't think of the number, I think it's Senate Bill 163, that will allow for doulas to be reimbursed by Medicaid. So right now, it just went through a second read. They're out of session, so it will be coming back within the next legislative session, and hopefully that will get passed all the way through for the state of Maryland. And this will help our sisters who are on Medicaid, low income, to receive doula care because they deserve, their babies deserve to live just like women who could, afford this. All right, so here's a mama with her doula and midwives with her. And I want to talk just a little bit about reproductive justice. Have any of you heard of reproductive justice?
No.
I haven't.
Okay. All right. So reproductive justice is different from reproductive rights. What reproductive justice is, it combines reproductive rights and social justice. So when you hear now National Organization of Women or Planned Parenthood or NARAL or I forget the other pro-life organizations, they're primarily advocating for reproductive rights, which is access to birth control, access to abortion, access to mammograms, pap smears, things of that nature. Well, reproductive justice says we not only do we want that, but we want social justice. We don't want any more Ma'Khia Bryant's happening. So it's twofold. So Sister Song is an organization of several reproductive groups. They're in Atlanta. There's several here in DC, and different reproductive justice groups are popping up around the country. But what they believe in is our human right as Black women to maintain personal bodily autonomy. So that means if someone wants to have an abortion, they should have access to that, or if they want birth control. To have children. If someone wants to have children, they should be able to have that covered. So if you want infertility, if you need infertility treatments and things of that nature, that should be covered. It should not be cost prohibitive not to have children. For women who don't want to have kids, that should be their prerogative, especially in the Black community. When someone gets married, the first question is, when y'all gonna have kids, or, things of that nature. And it's like, there's some women that just don't want to have children. And to parent our children in a safe and sustainable environment. So just like Flint, Michigan doesn't have clean water still, Puerto Rico still is, some places are still without electricity. Our babies are being killed indiscriminately by police, also Black on Black crime. So reproductive justice says that all these things are important to us for Black survival from birth through childhood to death. So why is reproductive justice important? Because that's where Black birth workers come in and come to the rescue. So Black birth workers utilize a reproductive justice framework within their practice. So they understand Black women should be allowed to birth how they want to birth. So if they want to birth at home, birth in a birthing center, or if they choose to birth in a hospital, that is their choice. They're also aware of the healthcare needs of pregnant and postpartum Black women. They believe Black women, when we say something is wrong, when you know your body and you know something is not right, as opposed to your doctor or your medical staff ignoring you, what your Black birth workers, which are doulas and midwives, do is they understand and they advocate for you. So if you say something's wrong, they're going to believe you. And that's what Serena Williams experienced. She kept saying something was wrong and they just did not believe her until her husband spoke up. Listen to Black women's pleas for medical care. I know when I was in the military, I worked labor and delivery. And then when I got out of the military, I worked at Prince George's Hospital Center in labor and delivery. And there were so many times where women were like, can I get my epidural? Can I this? Can I that? And doctors would say, oh, well, no, you can't do that because you need to get to this level of centimeters or what have you. Oh, you'll slow down your birth. Or they'll tell you you need a C-section when you really don't, if you want a VBAC. All these things that the doctors ignore Black women for, because when we think about going back to Dr. Sims, where he experimented on enslaved women and said that we don't feel pain. And they also embrace whole family involvement with the birth experience. That means that your little ones can attend your birth, your cousin, your aunt, your girlfriends, everyone can be there, because bringing a new life into the world is a community familial event, whereas in the hospital, it's a sanitized event. And it's treated like a disease as opposed to just part of the natural life process. All right, so can I get someone to read this quote about reproductive justice?
When we lift reproductive justice, we stand for sovereignty by women of color to birth with whom, where, when, and how they choose. The right to see their bodies live beyond their first year birthday, to successfully breastfeed and access health professionals and birth workers who reflect their ethnicity and understand their experiences is reproductive justice. Reproductive justice is human rights.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where do we go from here? What's next? Educate. And that's why I'm doing this workshop with you all. And thank you again. The goal is to educate, not only us women, but also women in our circles, women in our church, women in our community about their rights as far as access to Black birth workers, and to also save our lives. So my first call to action is to partner with Black women-led groups to educate their members of the facts surrounding Black maternal and infant death within the first year of birth. So that's what we're doing on this workshop. Call to action number 2, demand legislators take action via the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act of 2021. And that was just convened upon a couple of weeks ago. Madam Vice President Camilla Harris even talked about it, and she interviewed some Black mothers about their birthing experiences. And then also demanded they take action on other legislation that addresses racism's effect on Black women and their infants. So the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act of 2021 addresses the maternal health crisis in the United States, and congressional leaders have been fighting for critically important policies like a 12-month postpartum Medicaid coverage. Right now, women are kicked off of Medicaid after 2 months, postpartum. And most insurance companies do not cover you after 2 months. This also gives these moms and other moms access to full support, which would include doulas and their midwives. The leading people on this were Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Congresswoman Alma Adams, Senator Cory Booker, and other members of the Black Maternal Health Caucus. They build on existing legislation to comprehensively address every dimension of the maternal health crisis in the United States. And then in the state of Maryland, like I expressed earlier, there's a Senate Bill 163, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, which will allow Black women to access doulas, as well as a doula pilot program. This bill will create a pilot program that will train Black women and other women of color as doulas, create a pathway to certification that is fair and equitable, because certification for doulas is expensive, and then also allow them to be reimbursed by Medicaid. Call to action 3. Through community partnerships, our job, our role is to educate other Black women, especially those deemed low income, as well as families on Medicaid, about the importance of using Black birth workers for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum care. And this is important because a lot of these women, just like some of you said, that you weren't aware of reproductive justice and things of that nature, these sisters probably don't either, because they're trying to survive. But in order to survive, they need access. So if Black midwives have been delivering babies safely for centuries, we must reconcile with the unnecessary deaths of our Black sisters in our current modernized society, and acknowledge the importance of Black midwives and doulas and continue the practice of assisting Black women in their birth and postpartum care. Because our medical institutions were created with racial biases, especially the practice of gynecology, we must address how Black women and their babies have been harmed by racial indifference. My research considers the positive impact Black birth workers, such as midwives and doulas, have on Black birthing families. It's important to discuss the critical role of Black birth workers in shielding Black families from trauma of racialized healthcare, as well as how their intimate postpartum care reduces their own death and that of their babies. The goal is to increase Black families using Black birth workers, also empowering Black mothers to advocate for the prenatal care that they want, including using their birth plan, as well as providing family-centered care with a midwife, doula, and lactation specialist. And what studies have found is that when these families increase the use of Black birth workers, such as doulas and midwives, 89% of these mothers were able to initiate breastfeeding at the outset and continue breastfeeding within a year, and there were 0 maternal and infant deaths. And these are just some resources. Some are local that you can partner with, volunteer with, advocate for. And I especially want to bring attention to the bottom one, for Kira for Moms. Kira Johnson died during childbirth in 2016. And then last year, there was another, she was a doctor. She actually died during childbirth as well, and she advocated for herself. And then we also know about the Black doctor who had COVID, and she went live on Facebook and still died because she was deemed by the medical staff as being difficult, belligerent, and things of that nature. So as Black women, no one's gonna save us but ourselves. And here are definitely some resources where you all can get started. And Sequoia, the founder of Doula with D40, said, doula work means Black liberation. Birth work for us isn't just about 9 months or 6 weeks postpartum. It's about the longevity of Black life. And I just wanted to take a moment. These are 3 of the women who Dr. Sims practiced on over 20 to 30 times. I think it's important to name them, hold space for them, because they were harmed and they had no say. They just could not speak up for themselves. And that's the end. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And if anyone had any questions for me, the floor is open for Q&A.
This was very, very interesting. I didn't realize, before reading this, that there were so many concerns or so many problems with Black women giving birth. I do remember, this is a long time ago, before my son was born, that one of my coworkers almost died trying to give birth. This was back in, I want to say 99. I do remember that. And, she said she didn't think she was going to make it. But like for my birthing experience, I mean, I really didn't have any issues. My doctor was well-versed, and I had asked about having a doula, but I didn't really go further into that. But I had heard of having a doula, a midwife and all of that, but I just chose the traditional route. But this was very enlightening. I appreciate, and I definitely wish you the best and doing well with this.
Thank you. Thank you. Did anybody else have a question or comment?
I have one quick question, and you might have mentioned this at the beginning. I'm sorry, I was multitasking. What's the primary difference then between a doula and a midwife?
Okay, great question. So midwives they actually go through a nursing program. So you may hear the term nurse midwife. There are also lay midwives. So that may be your grandma. She's been birthing babies since the 40s or 50s or what have you. And they were the ones who the medical establishment set up different parameters. They're called granny midwives, where they had to go through reading tests, all these things. And these women, a lot of these women didn't know how to read. So the midwives actually, if you become a certified nurse midwife, then you're able to actually have hospital privileges and things of that nature. A doula is just kind of like your sister friend who is well-versed in prenatal care, birthing. So she would work side by side with a midwife. Say for instance, you decide to do a home birth. So she's there making sure that you're hydrated, that you have access to food, if your children want to come in. So she's kind of like that sister, but she's also there to coach you through the birthing process. Doulas are certified. There are various certifying organizations. However, like I said, it is cost prohibitive. Especially in Maryland with this new bill, they only picked 4 organizations that you had to have your certification through. And what they found after they put it in the bill is that these organizations are extremely expensive. And so it kind of made it cost prohibitive for Black women. So that's something that's happening now. I've done some letter writing to say, hey, there's other organizations like National Association of Black Doulas, they're certified doulas, and their cost is a little less than some of these bigger national organizations. So a doula is kind of like your sister friend, but she's trained in birthing. A nurse midwife is actually certified through a nursing program. So they may go to like a Howard or something like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? All righty. Well, I thank you all for this. Rhonda, did you have any last words since you helped me put this together? I really, really appreciate this.
I just wanted to say thank you for joining me tonight, guys. I really appreciate you guys. I didn't know what we were going to be talking about. When you said Black birth workers, I was like, what is she talking about? I was like, Lord, let me just try to gather some women together. But it was really informative. And I put in the chat, I know Deidre Cooper Owens. And so when you quoted, I was like, oh my God, Deidre, yes. And I'm familiar with her work. And so it was very informative. And it was information that I wish I had,
Me too.
before I had children, but
Me too.
so it's good information to know moving forward for other people and stuff like that. So thank you for sharing.
Awesome.
I learned a lot.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you again, Rhonda. And I'm just so honored. This is my last project for the semester. Woo, last week of school.
I think I'm just trying to say something.
Okay, I'm
I was
sorry.
just saying, I was just saying, do you have the compilation of words? Or no, that was just for your.
Oh, you know what? Let me see if I can access it. Let me see. Give me 1 second. I totally forgot.
If not, that's okay. But
Okay.
congratulations, and I wish you well on your.
Thank you.
journey.
It has been a journey. I mean, I'm just really grateful, having had experienced a minor stroke in 2019. It's been a journey. I'm learning to advocate for myself with school, saying, hey, I need an IEP and all that stuff. And so it's working. And, I'm just really grateful. And for one reason, I cannot access the words. If I can get them, I will send a copy to Rhonda, and she can send it to you all.
Okay.
All righty. Well, good night,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good night.
night.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.